Her parents gave her away to a mountain man for being sterile, but he made her the mother of triplets. In the rugged wilderness of the Montana Territory, where pine trees whispered ancient secrets and winter winds cut through the valleys like razor blades, stood the small frontier settlement of Cedar Falls. It was a place where traditions ran deeper than the mountain streams, where every family knew their neighbor's business, and where women were valued primarily for their ability to bear sons who would carry on the family name and work the harsh land. Hello, my dear friend. This is Jasper Ashwood, your narrator of Mountain Tales. Before we start, make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below telling me where you're tuning in from. A big hug to you all, and I hope you enjoy the story. Sarah Mae Thompson walked down the muddy main street of her hometown, feeling the weight of judgmental stares that followed her like persistent shadows. At 24 years old, she possessed a natural beauty that turned heads wherever she went, with her auburn hair that caught fire in the sunlight and green eyes that sparkled with a mixture of sorrow and fierce determination. Her fair skin bore the marks of honest work in the mountain air, helping her family tend their small homestead, where they raised cattle and grew what crops the rocky soil would allow. But all that beauty seemed meaningless when the inevitable topic arose at every church gathering, every community barn raising, every Sunday service. Sarah Mae had been married to Henry Miller for 3 years, a hard-working and decent man who loved her truly, but their union had not been blessed with the children that both families desperately hoped for. Her mother-in-law, Widow Patterson, never missed an opportunity to remind her of her shortcomings as a wife. "Look at the Henderson girl," she would say while churning butter on the porch. "Married 8 months after you and already nursing her second baby. Something ain't right with you, child." The words pierced Sarah Mae's heart like thorns, but she endured them silently, praying every night that the Lord would grant her the miracle of motherhood. The entire settlement seemed to have opinions about her situation. The women at the general store whispered when she passed by selecting supplies. "Poor Sarah Mae, so pretty and all, but can't give her husband children, must be paying for some sin." At the small wooden church during Sunday services, she felt the pitying glances of other women, especially those who arrived carrying their babies or with bellies swollen with new life. Her own mother, Martha Thompson, had begun showing signs of desperation. "Sarah Mae, honey," she said while they prepared supper, "it's been 3 years now. Maybe you should visit that herb woman over in Elk Ridge. They say she's got remedies for these things." But no matter how many bitter teas she drank, no matter how many prayers she offered, no matter how many visits to the traveling preacher's healing services she attended, her womb remained empty. Her father, Jacob Thompson, a man of few words but strong opinions, began showing his concern differently. He had grown quieter during family meals, avoiding the subject, but Sarah Mae noticed how his eyes darkened whenever news of other births reached their homestead. The pressure from both families intensified daily, and she felt like she was drowning in a sea of unmet expectations. Things worsened when Henry began staying late at the saloon, coming home smelling of whiskey and avoiding her eyes. One night, after a particularly painful argument, he confessed what Sarah Mae had already suspected. "Folks in town are saying maybe I should find someone who can give me children. My pa's been pressing me hard, Sarah Mae. I don't know what to do anymore." That night, Sarah Mae cried until no tears remained. She felt like a broken vessel, useless, a woman who had failed in what was supposed to be her most sacred purpose. The next morning, Henry left their cabin without saying goodbye, leaving only a letter explaining that he had decided to seek an annulment and start fresh in California. News of Henry's abandonment spread through Cedar Falls like wildfire. The pitying looks became more intense, the comments more cruel. "See what happens when a woman can't fulfill her duty," she heard the blacksmith's wife telling her neighbors. Poor Henry, such a good man, and she couldn't give him even one child. But what truly shattered Sarah Mae's heart was her own family's reaction. Her father, burdened by debts from failed crops and the harsh mountain winters, began to see her as a burden. "You ain't a married woman no more," he told her one afternoon while mending fence posts. "And from the looks of it, you ain't going to give us grandchildren neither. Don't know what we're going to do with you." The Thompson family's financial situation was precarious. The last 2 winters had been brutal, killing most of their livestock, and the rocky soil had yielded poor harvests. Jacob had borrowed money from various sources, including some mountain men who occasionally came down from the high country to trade furs and supplies for goods from civilization. One of these traders was known for his imposing presence and fierce reputation. The townspeople called him Bear Claw Mackenzie, a mountain man in his late 30s who led a small group of trappers living in the remote wilderness. He was a tall, powerfully built man with weathered features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to a person's soul. His dark hair hung long, often braided with leather cords and small bones that spoke of his life in the untamed wilderness. Jacob owed Bearclaw a considerable sum of money from several trading deals that had gone wrong due to poor timing and bad luck. The mountain man had been patient, but patience in the wilderness was a luxury that had limits. One crisp October afternoon, when the aspens had turned golden and the first snow threatened the high peaks, Bearclaw rode into the Thompson homestead, accompanied by two of his men. "Thompson," the mountain man said in his gravelly voice that carried the authority of someone who had survived years in unforgiving country. "Time's up. Need what you owe me, or I'll have to take something of equal value." His ice-blue eyes surveyed the property, evaluating every animal, every tool, every possession the family owned. Jacob removed his hat and twisted it nervously in his hands. "Bearclaw, brother, you know I'm good for it, but this year's been real bad for us. The winter killed most everything. The crops failed. Give me just a little more time." The mountain man shook his head slowly. "No more time, Thompson. My men need supplies for winter, and trading season's almost over. If you ain't got cash, I'll take something worth the debt." His gaze fell upon Sarah May, who had emerged from the cabin at the sound of raised voices. "Your daughter," Bearclaw said after a moment of silence that seemed to stretch forever. "She's young and looks strong. Could work for my group until the debt's paid off." Sarah May felt the earth shift beneath her feet. Her father exchanged a desperate look with her mother, who had gone pale as fresh snow. "Bearclaw," Jacob stammered, "she's my daughter. I can't just—" "Then find another way to pay me," the mountain man interrupted with finality. "But it'll be now, or I take everything you got, including this land." That night, the Thompson family had the most painful conversation of their lives. Sitting around their rough wooden table, where they had shared so many meals, Jacob and Martha explained to Sarah May the terrible situation they faced. "My girl," her mother said with tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, "we ain't got no choice. If we don't pay, he's going to take the homestead, and then the whole family'll be out in the cold with winter coming." Her father, with his head in his hands, added, "It's just temporary till we can scrape together the money. Bearclaw's got honor, he won't hurt you none." But Sarah May knew the truth. She knew her parents had found the perfect excuse to rid themselves of the daughter who had become a disappointment, the barren woman who couldn't fulfill family expectations and social obligations. In their hearts, they probably thought that at least this way she might be useful for something. "Besides," her mother added, trying to sound convincing, "they say mountain men respect women who can work hard. Maybe up there you'll find a better fate than what you'd have here with all the folks talking about you." The next morning, when the sun barely peeked over the eastern ridges, Bearclaw returned to the homestead. Sarah May had spent the night packing her few belongings into a leather satchel, some changes of clothes, her grandmother's worn Bible, a small tin daguerreotype of happier times, and a pressed wildflower from her wedding bouquet that she couldn't bring herself to throw away. The moment of farewell was brutal in its simplicity. Her parents hugged her briefly, murmuring empty promises about coming to get her soon, but their eyes couldn't meet hers. The neighbors had gathered to witness the spectacle, some with morbid curiosity, others with genuine sorrow for the young woman. Bearclaw waited mounted on his powerful stallion, his expression unreadable. When Sarah May approached, he extended a calloused hand to help her onto a second horse he had brought. "Ride beside me," he told her in simple, direct words. "Don't try running off. This country'll kill you faster than you can blink, and you don't know the trails." As they rode away from Cedar Falls, Sarah May didn't allow herself to look back. She felt as though part of her soul had been buried in that rocky soil, along with all her dreams of motherhood, of having a loving family, of being valued for who she was, rather than what she could provide. The mountain wind dried her tears before they could fall, and the sound of hoofbeats marked the rhythm of her new life, a life that was just beginning and already seemed loaded with pain and uncertainty. The group rode for hours under the merciless mountain sun, heading toward the high country where Bearclaw's band made their home. Sarah May rode in silence, fighting against the thoughts that swirled in her mind like a blizzard. She wondered what kind of life awaited her among the mountain men, if she would ever see her family again, if she could survive this new chapter of her existence that began with the bitter taste of abandonment and betrayal from those who should have protected her most. The mountain camp stretched across a high meadow, like a temporary city that could vanish within hours. Canvas tents and hide lean-tos formed a rough circle around a central fire pit that never completely died out. Sarah May observed this new world with a mixture of fascination and terror. As Bearclaw dismounted from his horse with the natural grace of someone born to wilderness life, the women of the group approached to inspect the newcomer with barely concealed curiosity. Their faces, bronzed by sun and wind, showed expressions ranging from indifference to open hostility. One of them, an older woman with grey hair braided with coloured beads and a stern expression, addressed Bearclaw in sharp tones. Though Sarah May couldn't understand all the mountain dialect, the woman's tone and gestures made her disapproval clear. "That's Iron Kate," Bearclaw explained to Sarah May, pointing to the older woman. "Says we don't need another mouth to feed, especially some soft town woman who probably don't know how to do nothing useful." His blue eyes studied Sarah May with a coldness that chilled her blood. "You'll have to prove you're worth your father's debt." They assigned her a space at the edge of camp, near where they kept the horses. Her shelter consisted of a piece of canvas stretched between poles that barely protected her from the constant mountain wind. She had no right to her own fire and had to share whatever food the other women prepared, and her tasks began before dawn of the first day. Iron Kate became her strictest supervisor, teaching her camp duties with a patience that bordered on cruelty. "Mountain folk don't keep lazy bones," she growled while showing her how to tan hides. "Don't work, don't eat, you die. Simple as that." Sarah May's hands, soft from her relatively comfortable life at the homestead, filled with blisters and cuts during the first days. The work was exhausting and constant. She had to rise before dawn to gather firewood, haul water from a creek over an hour's walk away, help prepare meals, clean the pelts from trapped animals, mend tents and clothing, and perform any other task the group's women deemed appropriate for someone of her low status. Her hands bled, her back ached constantly, and at night she collapsed on her makeshift bedroll, too exhausted even to cry. But the hardest part wasn't the physical work, it was the invisible barrier that existed between her and the rest of the camp. Bearclaw treated her like an object, something he had acquired to settle a debt. During the first weeks, he barely spoke to her beyond basic orders about her duties. When she tried to make conversation or ask questions about mountain customs, he looked at her with a mixture of impatience and disdain. "You ain't here to make friends," he told her one afternoon when Sarah May had tried to approach a group of children playing near the creek. "You're here to pay off debt. Sooner you understand that, easier it'll be for everyone." His words were like slaps, constantly reminding her of her status as property, an object traded for money. The other women in the group weren't any kinder. They spoke among themselves in mountain dialect, shooting her occasional glances that clearly indicated she was the subject of their conversations. When Sarah May tried to participate in group tasks like cooking or equipment repair, the women managed to exclude her subtly, forming closed circles where she had no place. Ravenswing, a young woman about her age who was married to one of the most respected trappers in the group, was especially cruel. "Town women are weak," she said one day while they washed clothes in the icy creek, making sure other women could hear her. "They complain about everything, don't know real work, and think they deserve respect without earning it. My husband says Bearclaw made a mistake bringing you here." But Sarah May wasn't the submissive woman everyone expected her to be. Despite the exhaustion and constant humiliation, something inside her rebelled against the situation. During the nights, when the camp settled into relative quiet, broken only by wind and nocturnal animal sounds, she planned ways to escape. She studied the guards' patterns, memorized the trails leading to the creek and the pastures where they kept the horses, and observed the group's movements during their hunting and trading expeditions. She knew her chances of surviving alone in the wilderness were slim, but desperation gave her a courage she didn't know she possessed. Her first escape attempt came after 3 weeks in camp. She had managed to steal some jerky and fill a water pouch, hoping her absence wouldn't be noticed until the next morning. She left her makeshift shelter in the pre-dawn hours, when only a few guards watched the camp's perimeter. She managed to get almost 3 miles away before the camp dogs detected her absence and began howling. Bearclaw found her before noon, tracking her prints with the ease of someone who had hunted much more elusive prey than a desperate woman. When he caught up to her, Sarah May was sitting on a boulder with bleeding feet and cracked lips from thirst. Too proud to beg, but too realistic to keep running. "Fool," was all he said, as he lifted her onto his horse like a sack of grain. The return trip to camp was made in absolute silence, but Sarah May could feel the contained fury of the mountain man in every movement of his body. The punishment was swift and humiliating. Bearclaw made her stand in the center of camp, while the entire group gathered to witness her shame. "This woman tried to run off," he announced in clear English, then repeated the message in mountain dialect. "Forgot she's here to pay a debt. Forgot that without us she'd die in the wilderness in less than a day." They tied her wrists with rough ropes that cut her skin every time she moved and forced her to perform the most degrading camp tasks for a full week: cleaning horse dung, washing everyone's clothes in the freezing creek, and sleeping in the open without the protection of her canvas shelter. But what hurt her most wasn't the physical punishment. It was the look of absolute contempt in Bearclaw's eyes. It was as if she had confirmed all his expectations about the inferiority of town women, about their inability to understand their place in the world. After the punishment, Sarah May tried to adapt her strategy. If she couldn't escape physically, at least she could maintain her dignity and resist the constant pressure to submit completely. She began refusing to perform certain tasks she considered particularly degrading, responding with defiance when the women insulted her, and maintaining an attitude of quiet rebellion that deeply irritated her captors. This passive resistance had unexpected consequences. Bearclaw, frustrated by her refusal to completely accept her situation, began paying her more attention, but not the kind she had hoped for. His eyes followed her as she worked, studying every gesture of defiance as if it were a puzzle that needed solving. "Why do you fight so hard?" he asked her one afternoon, when she had refused to help Raven's Wing with a particularly humiliating task. "Your family sold you, your husband abandoned you, your town considers you a failure as a woman. What you got left to fight for?" His words were like stab wounds, but Sarah May lifted her chin with pride. "I got me," she responded with a firm voice. "That's enough." But the camp's situation began to complicate in ways Sarah May hadn't anticipated. Tensions between different mountain groups intensified when news arrived that army patrols and territorial marshals were coordinating efforts to bring law and order to the region. Bearclaw received messengers almost daily, and discussions among the group's men became increasingly heated and frequent. One night, the camp was awakened by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. A group of mountain men from another band arrived with alarming news. A cavalry patrol was heading toward their territory, and they had been seen with local guides who knew the location of several camps. Bearclaw made quick and brutal decisions. The camp had to move immediately, abandoning everything that wasn't absolutely essential. The women and children would be sent to a secret refuge in the higher mountains, while the men prepared ambushes for the approaching soldiers. In the chaos of packing and preparing to flee, Sarah May saw an opportunity. With everyone focused on their own survival, maybe she could get lost in the confusion and finally escape. But when she tried to slip away from the group, Raven's Wing spotted her and shouted an alarm. Bearclaw appeared at her side in seconds, gripping her arm with a force that left bruises. "If you try to escape now," he growled in her ear, "you won't just die yourself. You'll put everyone else in danger. The soldiers will capture you and torture you until you tell them where we are." It was then that Sarah May truly understood how grave her situation was. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was a potentially deadly complication for the entire group. Her presence put them in additional danger, and her knowledge of the camp's location made her a security risk they couldn't afford. During the flight to the mountains, which lasted 4 days of continuous travel with very little rest, Sarah May experienced a type of exhaustion that went beyond the physical. Each step took her further from any hope of civilization. Each night spent sleeping on the rocky mountain ground, each resentful look from the mountain women who clearly blamed her for complicating their escape, pushed her deeper into despair. The new temporary camp was located in a series of natural caves that offered protection from the elements, but also felt like a stone prison. Space was limited, resources scarce, and tension among all group members reached dangerous levels. It was during the second week in the caves when Sarah May reached her deepest breaking point. Food rations had been reduced to portions that barely kept people alive, and as the person with the lowest status in the group, she received even less than the others. Her body, already weakened by months of exhausting work and constant stress, began to fail. One night, while lying on the cold cave floor listening to the hungry whimpers of children and the whispered arguments of adults about how long they could stay hidden, Sarah May felt something fundamental break inside her. It wasn't just her body that was surrendering. It was her spirit, her will to fight, her basic belief that life had any purpose or meaning. She rose silently and walked toward the cave entrance, where moonlight created ghostly shadows among the rocks. She looked toward the abyss that stretched before the cave, a precipice that promised a quick end to all the pain and humiliation she had endured. For the first time since arriving at the mountain camp, Sarah May seriously considered the possibility of giving up completely, of letting the mountain take her problems and shame forever. She had lost everything that once defined her identity: her family, her husband, her home, her hope of becoming a mother, her dignity as a woman, even her basic freedom as a human being. She remained there for hours, balanced on the edge of a decision she knew would be irreversible, while tears ran silently down her cheeks, and her heart debated between the desire for peace and some deep survival instinct that refused to die completely. In that darkest night of her soul, Sarah May touched the bottom of human despair, where each breath felt like a betrayal of her desire to simply stop existing. The morning that changed everything arrived unannounced, as decisive moments in life often do. Sarah May woke with her body aching from another night of restless sleep on the stone cave floor. But there was something different in the air. A fresh breeze carried the scent of rain from distant mountains, and for the first time in weeks, sunbeams filtered through the clouds to warm the cave entrance. As she slowly sat up, she noticed the camp was unusually quiet. Most of the men had left before dawn on a scouting expedition, leaving only the women, children, and some elders in the shelter. That's when she heard a weak moan coming from the adjacent cave. Following the sound, Sarah May found little Hawk, a mountain child no more than 7 years old, curled in a corner with high fever and violent shivering. His mother, Morning Star, had gone to search for medicinal herbs in the nearby mountains, leaving the boy in the care of his grandmother, who slept deeply due to her advanced age. Without thinking twice, Sarah May approached the child. She had helped her mother with the sick back in Cedar Falls and recognized the symptoms of a dangerous fever. Using the fresh water she had collected the night before, she began cooling the boy's forehead with damp cloths, murmuring soft words in English, while the child delirious in mountain dialect. For hours, Sarah May cared for the child with a dedication that surprised even the mountain women, who gradually approached to observe. When little Hawk began convulsing, she held him firmly but gently, preventing him from hurting himself against the rocks. Her hands, hardened by months of hard work, moved with a natural tenderness that spoke of a deep maternal instinct that had never had a chance to express itself. It was this way that Bearclaw found her when he returned from his expedition at sunset. Upon entering the cave, he stopped abruptly, seeing Sarah May rocking the sick child against her chest, singing a lullaby from her homeland with a hoarse but melodious voice. Little Hawk had stopped shivering and breathed more easily, clearly out of danger. For the first time since he had known her, Bearclaw saw Sarah May not as an object or burden, but as a complete woman. The way her arms protectively wrapped around the child, the expression of concentration and affection on her face, the way she had risked her own precarious position in the group to help someone who owed her nothing. All this revealed aspects of her character that he had chosen to ignore. "You saved my nephew," he said quietly when Sarah May finally noticed his presence. His words lacked their usual coldness, replaced by something that might have been respect. "It was the right thing to do," Sarah May responded simply without looking up from the child, who now slept peacefully in her arms. Any mother would have done the same. "But you ain't his mother," Bearclaw pointed out. And in doing so, both felt the weight of unspoken words floating between them. The accusations of sterility, her family's abandonment, all the pain that had defined their relationship until that moment. That night, something fundamental changed in the dynamic between them. Bearclaw began observing Sarah May with new eyes, noticing details he had overlooked. The way she rose before anyone else to stoke fires that had died out during the night. How she shared her meager food ration with the smallest children when she thought no one was watching. The infinite patience with which she taught English words to those who showed interest in learning. Morning Star, Little Hawk's mother, became Sarah May's first real ally within the group. When she returned from her fruitless search for medicinal herbs to find her son recovering thanks to the Mexican woman's care, gratitude completely transformed her perception. "My son told me you sang him songs from your land," Morningstar confessed to Sarah May a few days later while they worked together preparing hides. "I didn't know you understood our ways." "I don't," Sarah May admitted. "I just sang what I felt in my heart. I guess love doesn't need specific words." This conversation was overheard by other women in the group who began reconsidering their prejudices about the outsider. Iron Kate, the most respected matriarch, approached Sarah May that same afternoon with a thoughtful expression. "My great-grandson says your hands have medicine," the old woman said, studying Sarah May's face with eyes that had seen many decades of life. "Says when you touched him the pain went away. How's that possible?" Sarah May had no answer for that question. She only knew that when she had seen the child suffering, something instinctive had taken control of her actions. "Back in my settlement, my grandmother said some people are born with the gift of healing," she responded honestly. "Never thought I might have it." "Maybe," Iron Kate murmured. "The spirits brought you here for a reason we don't understand yet." As days passed, Sarah May began noticing subtle changes in Bearclaw's behavior toward her. He no longer gave her orders with his previous brusqueness. When he assigned tasks, he explained them in more detail, even showing her more efficient methods to complete them. During communal meals, he made sure she received her fair share of food, something he had never done before. One evening, while Sarah May worked repairing a fishing net by the creek, Bear Claw approached and sat on a nearby rock. For several minutes neither spoke, simply sharing the silence while the sun disappeared behind the mountains. "Why do you hate me so much?" Sarah May finally asked, without looking up from her work. The question caught him off guard. Bear Claw had expected resentment, pleas, even attempts at seduction, but not this direct and vulnerable honesty. "I don't hate you," he responded after a long pause. "I hate what you represent." "And what do I represent?" "The weakness of my people," he admitted with difficulty. "My folk are dying, Sarah May. The army hunts us from the south, marshals from the north. Every year there are fewer of us. Every year our territory shrinks more. We can't afford to protect those who can't protect themselves." "Then why didn't you kill me?" she asked, finally looking up to meet his ice-blue eyes. "Because," he began, then stopped, struggling with words he had never had to say. "Because from the first day I saw you, something inside me rebelled against the idea of hurting you, and that scared me more than any army." That confession changed the air between them in a tangible way. For the first time, Sarah May saw the man behind the mountain warrior, someone burdened with responsibilities that weighed more than mountains, someone who had hardened his heart to survive, but hadn't completely lost his capacity to feel. "In my settlement," Sarah May told him that night while they shared food, "they say the strongest people are those who can be gentle without being weak. My grandfather taught me that true power comes from protecting those who can't protect themselves, not from abandoning them. Your grandfather never had to choose between saving a stranger or saving his own family," Bear Claw replied, but without his previous harshness. "Maybe not," Sarah May conceded, "but I think he would have found a way to do both." As weeks passed, these moments of conversation became more frequent. Bear Claw began telling her about his childhood, about the days when his band was numerous and prosperous, when they didn't have to hide in caves like cornered animals. He told her about his younger sister, who had died in an army attack when she was barely 15, and how that loss had hardened his heart against anything connected to civilization. "But you ain't like them," he admitted one night while they watched stars from the cave entrance. "You're stronger than I thought, more true." Sarah May felt something move in her chest at these words. For months, she had been treated like an object, like a failure, like a burden. Hearing someone recognize her strength, her value as a person, awakened emotions she had buried deeply. "Back in my settlement, they considered me broken," she confessed, surprising herself with her honesty. "Said a woman who can't bear children ain't worth nothing." "Your settlement was blind," Bear Claw responded with an intensity that surprised her. "I've seen how you treat our children, how you care for our sick. I've seen your heart, Sarah May. It ain't broken. It's bigger than most folks I've known." Those words broke something inside her, something she had been holding back for years. Tears began flowing before she could stop them. Years of pain and rejection, finally finding an outlet. Bear Claw, without saying a word, drew her to him and let her cry against his chest, his strong hands gently stroking her hair. It was in that moment of shared vulnerability that both felt the definitive change in their relationship. What had begun as a commercial transaction, what had continued as a relationship between captor and prisoner, transformed into something much deeper and dangerous. True love. The following weeks brought growing intimacy between them. Bear Claw began looking for excuses to spend time with Sarah May, teaching her about mountain traditions, showing her how to track animals in the forest, sharing stories of his people that he rarely told strangers. She, in turn, taught him songs from her homeland, told him about the traditions of her settlement, and shared dreams she had never expressed aloud. The group began noticing these changes. Some women, especially Morning Star and Iron Kate, watched them with silent approval. Others, led by Ravenswing, viewed the growing closeness with suspicion and resentment. "Bear Claw's losing his judgment," Ravenswing muttered to her friends one afternoon. "That town woman has bewitched him. What'll happen to us when he puts her needs above the group's?" But Iron Kate, who had observed everything with the wisdom of her many years, had a different perspective. "Spirits work in mysterious ways," she told whoever would listen. "Maybe this woman wasn't sent to weaken us, but to remind us what's really worth protecting." The decisive moment came during an especially cold night in late autumn. Sarah May had been feeling strange for several days. Morning nausea, sensitivity to certain smells, a fatigue she couldn't explain. At first she attributed these symptoms to stress and poor nutrition, but when she realized she had lost track of her monthly cycles, A possibility she had stopped considering years ago began forming in her mind. The revelation hit her like lightning during a particularly quiet dawn. She woke with a certainty that came from the deepest part of her being. She was pregnant. After years of being labeled sterile, after losing her husband for her supposed inability to conceive, her body had decided to create life in the most improbable place, with the most unexpected man. The emotional impact was so intense that she had to leave the cave to breathe fresh air. She sat on a rock overlooking the valley below, one hand unconsciously resting on her still flat belly, while processing the implications of this miracle that had arrived when she least expected it. Bearclaw found her there when he went out to check the night guards. He immediately noticed that something had changed in her, a subtle luminosity in her skin, a new serenity in her posture, something indefinable but undeniable. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting beside her with the naturalness he had developed in recent weeks. Sarah May looked at him, and in her eyes he saw a mixture of joy, fear, hope, and amazement that took his breath away. When she took his hand and placed it on her belly, when she whispered the words that would change everything between them forever, Bearclaw felt as if the world was reorganizing around him. "We're going to have a child," Sarah May murmured, her voice trembling with the magnitude of the revelation. "Your child, our child." In that moment, under the starry sky of the mountain wilderness, while the wind carried the scent of earth and the promise of new beginnings, both understood that their lives had changed irrevocably. The love that had bloomed between different cultures now manifested in the most fundamental way possible. New life that represented the union of two worlds, tangible proof that the human heart can transcend any barrier imposed by society. The news of Sarah May's pregnancy spread through the mountain camp like ripples in a pond, provoking reactions ranging from celebration to open indignation. Iron Kate was the first to publicly bless the union, declaring that the spirits had spoken through the woman's womb. But Raven's Wing and her followers saw in the pregnancy a betrayal of mountain blood purity and began organizing silent resistance against what they considered contamination of their lineage. "A half-breed can't lead our people," Raven's Wing muttered during a women's meeting where Sarah May wasn't present. "What will other bands think when they know our leader mixed with a town woman? They'll see us as weak, as traitors to our own blood." But Bearclaw had made a decision that transcended his band's opinions. The morning after receiving news of the pregnancy, he called all group members to a formal meeting in the sacred circle they had established at the center of the temporary camp. With Sarah May at his side, his posture radiated an authority that admitted no questioning. "This woman carries my child in her womb," he announced with a firm voice that echoed among the rocks. "Whoever disrespects her, disrespects me. Whoever questions her place in this band, questions my leadership, and whoever threatens my family's safety will face the consequences." His words were translated into mountain dialect by Iron Kate, who added her own interpretation. "The spirits have chosen. Our leader's seed has found fertile ground in this woman. To deny it would be to defy the gods themselves." Raven's Wing dared to raise her voice. "And what about our traditions? About the purity of our blood? Are we going to let an outsider change everything we are?" Bearclaw's response was immediate and decisive. He approached Raven's Wing until he was inches from her face, his ice-blue eyes shining with dangerous intensity. "Our traditions have led us to hide in caves like wounded animals. Our blood purity has reduced us to barely 30 people. Maybe it's time our traditions evolved, or we'll die clinging to them." The silence that followed was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Even the children stopped playing to observe the confrontation. It was a decisive moment, not just for Sarah May and Bearclaw, but for the entire band. What was at stake was much more than accepting a foreign woman. It was the very survival of their way of life. Morning Star was the first to break the silence. She rose slowly and walked towards Sarah May, taking her hands in hers. "This woman saved my son's life when I couldn't," she said with a clear voice. "If that don't make her one of us, then I don't understand what it means to be mountain folk." One by one, other group members began expressing their support. The elders remembered old prophecies about a woman who would come from the lowlands to bring new life to the band. The younger men spoke of the courage they had seen in Sarah May during the most difficult moments. Even some of Raven's Wing's followers began reconsidering their position, but the real challenge would come from outside the camp. 4 weeks after the internal confrontation, messengers arrived with news that chilled everyone's blood. Jacob Thompson, accompanied by territorial marshals and some men from Cedar Falls, was heading toward the mountains, searching for his kidnapped daughter. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. The same man who had handed Sarah May over as payment for a debt now came as her rescuer, probably motivated more by social pressure and guilt than genuine paternal love. Bearclaw understood the mentality of men like Jacob Thompson. The shame of losing a daughter so publicly had led them to create a narrative where she had been a victim rather than merchandise. "They ain't taking her," Bearclaw declared that night, while preparations for the inevitable encounter developed around him. "Whatever happens, Sarah May stays here by her own choice." But Sarah May knew the situation was more complex than he understood. Her father came not just to rescue her, but to restore the family honor that had been lost when the story of her sale became public in Cedar Falls. If she returned with him, she might be seen as a rescued victim. If she stayed, she would forever be the town woman who had chosen savages over her own people. The meeting was scheduled for dawn in a neutral valley, equidistant between the mountain camp and the route the search party was following. Bearclaw chose his best men to accompany him, but insisted that Sarah May be present so she could speak for herself. When the two groups met, the tension was so palpable it seemed the air itself might explode. Jacob Thompson, dressed in his best clothes and accompanied by a territorial marshal and 6 deputies, studied his daughter with a mixture of relief and horror. The change in Sarah May was evident. Her skin was bronzed by mountain sun. Her body had developed new strength, and there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a confidence he had never seen. "Hello, daughter," Jacob began with a trembling voice. "I came to take you home. This misunderstanding has gone on too long." "Misunderstanding?" Sarah May repeated, her voice loaded with a coldness that surprised her father. "Is that what you call selling me to pay your debts?" The territorial marshal intervened before Jacob could respond. "Miss Thompson, we understand you've been through a traumatic experience, but you're safe now. These mountain men can't hold you against your will." "Against my will?" Sarah May instinctively placed a hand on her belly, where her pregnancy was beginning to show to those who knew what to look for. "Marshal, I believe you don't understand the situation." It was then that Bearclaw spoke, his English carefully pronounced to ensure there were no misunderstandings. "Your daughter is here because she chooses to be here. She's my wife according to the laws of my people, and she's carrying my child." The impact of these words on Jacob was visible. His face went pale as fresh snow, and he had to lean against his horse to keep from falling. The marshal, for his part, put his hand on his pistol grip. "That's impossible," Jacob murmured. "The doctors said, everyone said she was barren." "Yes, Papa, that's what they said." Sarah May completed the sentence that had defined much of her previous life. "But as you can see, they were wrong. Or maybe I just needed to find the right man." The silence that followed was interrupted by the marshal, who had clearly decided that diplomacy had failed. "This is ridiculous. A decent American woman can't choose to live like a savage. Miss Thompson, you have 5 minutes to gather your things and come with us, or we'll take more drastic measures." The implicit threat electrified the atmosphere. The mountain men tensed their rifles while the deputies moved hands to their weapons, but it was Sarah May who took control of the situation. "Marshal," she said with an authority no one expected from her, "I'm a grown woman, not a lost child. I have the right to choose my own life, my own husband, my own destiny, and I choose to stay here with my family." "Your family is here!" Jacob shouted, finally finding his voice. "Your blood, your people, your real home." "My family," Sarah May responded, with a calm that surprised even Bearclaw, "is the one that loves me when I can't give anything in return. My family is the one that protects me when I'm vulnerable, not the one that sells me when I become inconvenient. My family is the one that sees me as a complete person, not as a walking failure." Her words cut through the air like knives, and Jacob stepped back as if he had been physically struck. For the first time in his life, he was facing the real consequences of his actions, reflected in the eyes of the daughter he had betrayed. "The lady has spoken," Bearclaw intervened, his voice loaded with cold dignity. "My wife has chosen. If you try to take her by force, you'll die in these mountains. But if you leave in peace, nobody gets hurt." The marshal quickly evaluated the situation. His 6 deputies were outnumbered by the mountain men, and they were in unknown territory. Furthermore, the woman had clearly made her choice, and forcing her to return would be legally and morally complicated. "Miss Thompson," he said finally, "if you ever change your mind, we'll know where to find you." He turned to Jacob. "Mr. Thompson, your daughter has made her choice. There's nothing more we can do here legally." Jacob looked at Sarah May one last time, and in his eyes she saw something she had never seen before, respect mixed with remorse. "Daughter," he murmured, if you ever need anything." "I needed a father who would protect me when you sold me," Sarah May responded softly. I needed a family that would love me when everyone told me I was worthless, but I don't need anything from you anymore, Papa. I found everything I needed here." The search party retreated slowly, leaving behind more than a lost daughter. They left behind their own prejudices, their traditional expectations, and the opportunity to know the extraordinary woman Sarah May had become. The months that followed were of constant transformation for Sarah May and the entire band. Her pregnancy progressed with health and vitality that surprised everyone, especially herself. Iron Kate became her mentor and protector, teaching her mountain traditions about pregnancy and childbirth, the songs sung to bless unborn children, and the ceremonies that would ensure a safe birth. But it was during the 8th month of pregnancy when Sarah May experienced something that would change everything again. During a routine examination that Iron Kate performed using traditional mountain methods, the old woman stopped abruptly, her weathered face showing an expression of amazement. "Child," she murmured, pressing different areas of Sarah May's belly with expert hands. "There's something different here, something special." "Different how?" Sarah May asked, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Iron Kate continued her examination, speaking softly in mountain dialect as she worked. Finally, she sat back with eyes shining in a way Sarah May had never seen. "It ain't one baby," she announced solemnly. "It's 3. 3 heartbeats, 3 spirits growing. The gods have decided to make up for all them years of waiting." The news that Sarah May was expecting triplets spread through the camp like wildfire. For mountain folk, multiple births were considered divine signs, special blessings indicating that the spirits had grand plans for the family. Even Ravenswing, who had maintained her silent opposition, had to acknowledge that something supernatural was occurring. Bear Claw received the news with a mixture of joy and responsible terror. 3 children meant 3 times the responsibility, but also 3 times the blessing. That night, while holding Sarah May under the stars, both felt the weight and magic of the moment. 3, he murmured against her hair. "The woman they said couldn't have children is going to give us 3 at once." "Your people are right," Sarah May responded, feeling the movements of the babies in her womb. "The spirits are speaking. Maybe this is their way of telling us that true love can overcome anything." The birth came during an early snowstorm that isolated the camp from the outside world. As if the elements themselves had conspired to make the birth a sacred event, snow began falling, just as Sarah May felt the first contractions. Iron Kate directed the birth with the help of Morningstar and other experienced women from the band. The process was long and difficult, but Sarah May faced each contraction with fierce determination that inspired all present. During the most intense hours of labor, when pain threatened to overwhelm her, she clung to Bear Claw's hands and found strength in their love. The first baby was born when the storm reached its peak, as if he had been waiting for the perfect moment to make his entrance into the world. He was a perfect boy, with his father's strong features, but his mother's expressive eyes. His cry was so powerful it could be heard above the wind. "Storm," Bear Claw murmured, studying his son's face. "He'll be called Storm because he was born when the elements danced." The second baby followed an hour later. A girl whose arrival coincided with a moment of calm in the storm. Her presence brought instant peace to the tent, as if she carried serenity in her very essence. "Silent peace," Sarah May decided, admiring her daughter's delicate features, "because she brought us calm when we needed it most." The third baby took her time, arriving just as the first rays of sun began filtering through the dispersing clouds. She was another girl, but this one had something special in her eyes, a depth that seemed ancient even in a newborn. "Dawn," Bear Claw and Sarah May said at the same time, smiling as they realized they had thought the same thing, because she was born with the new light. The birth of the triplets marked the beginning of a new era for the mountain band. The 3 babies weren't just Bear Claw and Sarah May's children, they became symbols of hope and renewal for the entire group. Their very existence challenged beliefs about racial purity, demonstrating that true love could create something beautiful and powerful. In the months that followed, Sarah May experienced a final transformation that completed her journey from rejected woman to respected matriarch. Her natural ability to heal, combined with her role as mother of the first children born to the band in years, made her a central figure in camp life. The women who had once rejected her now sought her advice on child-rearing, medicine, and conflict resolution. Her unique perspective, formed by having lived in 2 different worlds, made her invaluable as a mediator and counselor. Even Ravenswing eventually sought her help when her own child fell ill, and the successful healing of the boy finally sealed her acceptance into the band. But perhaps the most profound change was in the relationship between Sarah May and Bear Claw. What had begun as a commercial transaction had evolved through mutual respect to become a love that transcended all cultural barriers. Together, they created a new form of leadership that combined mountain strength with frontier compassion, tradition with adaptability. One afternoon, while watching her 3 children play in the camp, Storm chasing butterflies with his father's intensity, Silent Peace patiently caring for the smaller children, and Dawn studying everything around her with wise eyes, Sarah May reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. "What you thinking about?" Bearclaw asked, approaching to sit beside her on the rock that had become their favorite place to contemplate the valley. "About the paths life takes," Sarah May responded, taking his hand in hers. 2 years ago I believed my life was over. I thought I was a broken woman, worthless, destined for loneliness. And look where I am now. The spirits knew what they were doing when they brought you to me," he murmured, gently kissing her forehead. "Maybe everything you went through before was preparation for this, to become the woman we needed. Or maybe," Sarah May suggested with a smile that radiated contentment, "I just needed to learn that home isn't a place where you're born, but where you choose to love and be loved." As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky with shades of gold and rose, Sarah May Thompson understood finally that she had found something she had never consciously sought, but had yearned for all her life: a true family, unconditional love, and a purpose that went beyond the expectations others had placed on her. Her triplets represented more than just her children. They were living proof that miracles occur when we least expect them, that love can flourish in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes losing everything we thought we needed is the first step to finding everything we really wanted. In the mountains of the American frontier, where 2 cultures had met and merged through love, Sarah May had found her true home and become the mother she had always been destined to be. Sarah May's story teaches us one of the most powerful lessons about the human condition, that our true worth is never defined by the limitations others impose on us, but by the strength we find within ourselves when everything seems lost. For years, this extraordinary woman carried the weight of a cruel label that society had placed on her, believing that her inability to conceive made her an incomplete person, a failure as a woman. How many times in our own lives do we allow others' opinions to dictate our personal worth? How many times do we accept the limitations that society, family, or even ourselves impose, without questioning whether they truly reflect our real essence? Sarah May shows us that sometimes it's necessary to lose everything we thought defined us to discover who we really are. Her transformation didn't happen overnight, nor was it an easy path. She had to face the most painful rejection of all, abandonment by her own family. She had to endure humiliation, exhausting work, and the feeling of being invisible in a world that didn't want her. But it was precisely in that darkness where she found her inner light, that strength that no external circumstance can extinguish. The love that bloomed between Sarah May and Bearclaw reminds us that the deepest human connections transcend all artificial barriers we construct: race, culture, social class, or family expectations. When 2 people recognize each other in their purest humanity, when they see each other as complete souls rather than social roles, love can create miracles that defy all logic. But perhaps the most powerful lesson from this story is that miracles don't always arrive when we expect them, but when we need them most. Sarah May spent years longing to be a mother, years feeling broken by her apparent inability to conceive. Yet when her moment finally came, it wasn't just 1 child she received, but 3, as if the universe had decided to compensate for all the previous pain with a tripled blessing. Her triplets represent much more than the fulfillment of a maternal dream. They symbolize the victory of love over prejudice, of hope over despair, of faith over doubt. Each of those babies is a living declaration that we must never give up in the face of circumstances, because life has a mysterious way of surprising us just when we need it most. The story also teaches us about the true nature of family. Sarah May discovered that real family isn't defined by shared blood, but by unconditional love, mutual protection, and complete acceptance. Her biological parents saw her as merchandise when she became inconvenient, but her new mountain family embraced her when she was vulnerable and celebrated her when she triumphed. In our own lives, we often cling to toxic relationships or limiting situations simply because they're familiar, or because society tells us that's how it should be. Sarah May shows us the courage required to let go of what harms us, even when it's all we know, to make room for something better. Her transformation from rejected woman to respected matriarch didn't occur because she fundamentally changed who she was, but because she finally found a place where her true nature could flourish. The qualities she had always possessed, her compassion, her inner strength, her natural wisdom were recognized and valued for the first time in her life. This story reminds us that each of us has a unique purpose in this world, talents and qualities that can make a real difference in others' lives. Sometimes that purpose doesn't reveal itself until we face our darkest moments, until we're stripped of everything we thought defined us and forced to discover our true essence. Sarah May also teaches us about the importance of resilience and personal dignity. Even in her most vulnerable moments, she maintained a core of self-respect that no one could break. She refused to accept that her worth as a person depended on others' approval, and that inner determination was what ultimately led to her triumph. Sarah May's life inspires us to question the labels we've accepted about ourselves, to challenge the limitations others have put in our path, and to maintain faith that our moment of triumph will come even when everything seems impossible. Her story is a testament to the transformative power of true love, both the love we give and the love we receive, and how that love can create new realities that transcend all expectations.